Hello and welcome to World News Tonight here on TVP World. I'm Anna Jabłońska. Our main focus tonight is Poland and regional security. We also have the latest updates and insight from Ukraine for you. All that and more in a minute, but first let's look at tonight's headlines. Poland has arrested a suspect believed to have been carrying out, planning and attempting acts of sabotage. Russia moves troops from its Baltic exclave of Kaliningrad to the Kursk region. And Poland signs a €186 million deal to buy dozens of reconnaissance vehicles. Poland's interior minister said today that another person had been arrested in connection with attempted sabotage on Polish soil just last week. In recent months, Poland has detained nearly a dozen members of a suspected Russian spy ring in connection with alleged sabotage plots.
Interior Minister Tomasz Siemoniak has announced a thorough review of the security situation in the central Mazovian province, saying that all the problems that exist throughout Poland, including acts of sabotage, are concentrated in this region, which is home to the capital, Warsaw.
If there is no public information, it doesn't mean that there is nothing going on in these matters. I can tell you, without revealing more details, that last week another person was arrested in connection with the planning and execution of diversionary acts on Polish territory.
Meanwhile, Germany has issued a European arrest warrant for Ukrainian national in connection with the Nord Stream pipeline explosions. The man was said to be one of the divers who planted explosives on pipelines running from Russia to Germany in September 2022. So far, it is not clear who ordered the plot to destroy them.
In my opinion, Putin, well known as an agent in KGB former officer, has given the order to the secret services and special forces like GRU and others to wake up some spies in Europe to prepare for the guerrilla war fighting and provocations and other actions similar to those.
Last October, a key gas pipeline in the Baltic Sea between Finland and Estonia was damaged. According to Chinese media reports, the Chinese-owned cargo ship Nunu Polar Bear was responsible. Finland and Estonia are still conducting a joint criminal investigation centered around the vessel.
They will do a lot of things to confirm that we are the strongest nation, the strongest state around the globe, better, stronger than the US. So all the time they will support the Russian Federation, even in the game of spies, in the game of secret services.
Back in May, a commission was established to investigate Russian and Belarusian influence in Poland in the years 2004-2024. Prime Minister Donald Tusk announced that the first report of the commission will be presented on October 29th.
Ukrainian forces have advanced further in the Kursk region of Russia, says Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Our Ukraine correspondent Oskar G is joining us right now live from Kiev with the latest. Good evening, Oz. So what more can you tell us about the ongoing operation?
Good evening, Anna. Well, if the first week of the operation was marked by tight operational security and silence from Kyiv, the last few days have started to show that this is the normal situation now. We are getting updates on the Kursk region like we're getting updates on the Donetsk region, with Zelensky talking about this in his addresses to the Ukrainian people. Talking today, speaking to the Commander-in-Chief, General Sikorski, in a video released on social media, Zelensky talked about the fact that Ukrainian troops have advanced in the Kursk region, which is the opposite of what the Russians had said a few days ago, that the offensive had been stopped. It's very clear, according to the Ukrainians, that they are still on the move. Also, he said that 100 Russian troops had surrendered to Ukrainian forces. Let's take a listen to that conversation. We've got a little clip of that over here.
Thank you for adding 100 people to our prisoner exchange fund. That will help bring our boys and girls home.
Now, we also understand from the Ukrainian government sources were talking to the press briefing that Russian troops are on the move. They're on the move from Crimea. They're on the move in Donetsk. They're also on the move, reportedly, from Kaliningrad. So it looks like this operation is having some success in diverting those reinforcements. Those Russian troops have been causing so much difficulty for the Ukrainian defenders on those front lines in the east of the country, are now being pulled to try and reinforce Russian territory, which is something so extraordinary. It could not have been predicted 3 weeks ago, yet here we are with daily updates on what's happening inside Russian territory. We've even seen today Ukrainian reporters doing a TV briefing from inside Ukrainian-occupied Russian territory. So a remarkable series of events happening in Ukraine and inside Russia at the moment, with Ukrainian forces showing real resolve and determination to make this campaign last, to prolong it. They're clearly digging in and not expecting to go anywhere anytime soon.
Well, that's a very interesting turn of events, and every day something happens, something changes in Ukraine and for Ukraine, so do please keep us up to date with that. Thank you all very much for your live report. Take care. Now, Poland's Interior Minister Tomasz Siemoniak revealed today that major investments have recently been made to upgrade the systems protecting Poland's border with Belarus. It comes as Germany announced plans to extend temporary border controls to help tackle irregular migration. And Poland's security was given a ringing endorsement by the U.S. ambassador to Warsaw.
Cycling along the Suwałki Gap, dubbed by some as NATO's Achilles heel. The US ambassador to Poland was accompanied by his American counterpart in Lithuania to pledge security support.
We're here with our embassies and also a large American military footprint. As I always say in Poland, Polska jest bezpieczna I Polska jest zabezpieczona. Poland is safe and Poland is secure.
The Suwałki Gap is a narrow 70-kilometre-long stretch of land connecting Kaliningrad and Belarus that lies between Poland and Lithuania. While the Suwałki Gap is strategically important, Poland and its Baltic neighbours are also battling illegal border crossings from Belarus and Russia. Germany is pushing for an extension to checks introduced for the Euro 2024 championships along its borders with Poland, the Czech Republic, Austria and Switzerland. Poland introduced a buffer zone along part of its border with Belarus after the fatal stabbing of a soldier by a migrant in late May. Officials said illegal crossing attempts subsequently fell from around 150 a day to less than half that figure. Germany's Interior Minister said extending border checks will help curb illegal migration.
We will continue our temporary border controls for as long as they are necessary to stop people smugglers and limit irregular migration.
Poland's Interior Minister said significant investments have been made in recent weeks to improve the electronic systems guarding the border and to seal the barrier itself.
We are taking a multi-pronged approach to the problem, not just addressing the effects, but also the cause, which includes dealing with the migrants' countries of origin and with Belarus, urging it to cease these sorts of activities.
It's estimated that there have been around 100,000 crossing attempts from Belarus to Poland between 2021 and June this year. Poland is partnering with a number of countries and deploying 17,000 troops on its eastern frontier to tackle the crisis.
Peter Stano, the head spokesperson for the EU's foreign affairs and security policy, recently praised Armenia for implementing key reforms under its existing agreement with the European Union. For more on that, we go live to our correspondent Diana Skaya in the Armenian capital, Yerevan. Now, hello, Diana. Are these reforms a sign of Armenia's gradual shift away from Russia, bringing it closer to Europe and the West?
Well, Anya, it's what mostly people, of course, would want. I mean, the country here still is definitely divided now. What Stano had said was that since 2017, since that EU agreement with Armenia, was the main goal was to actually push through not only democratic reforms, but also improve Armenia's standing. Now, a lot of the things that has happened, of course, was, of course, to improve Armenian living standards and based by EU structures in terms of course, fighting corruption, which is still a very difficult task here to tackle here, particularly in the police force, but also improvement. Of course, the EU has really aided in, for instance, improving Armenia's local governing municipalities. For example, where I'm standing right now, just last year in this little park here, it was actually a dump. We're almost in the center of Yerevan. This was filled with garbage, filled with sometimes really rats coming through. And now it's a thriving, beautiful park. You see here kids playing in the daytime, the elderly playing, sitting here. There's a place to play board games, water, like a little water park behind me, really thriving. So a lot of those changes are happening. Now, of course, what Stano did say that it wasn't necessarily a sign that Armenia would be integrating into the EU. However, he did say that this is only going to be in Armenia's hands, and without, of course, looking at Georgia or Moldavia or Ukraine, for instance. It really depends, he said, on Armenia itself and what Armenia will do and what Armenia is shifting. Another thing, of course, also that happens is Armenia has become a little better, of course, with the EU aid in terms of customs. We know that the 1st of August, officially Russian border guards have left the Armenian airport of Zvartnots. Right now, the only Russian border guards left are those who are guarding the border with Turkey, Iran, and their military base in Gyumri. But we do definitely see these signs here of more easier forms. I remember years ago when we would go simply to pay bills in the local municipalities here, it was hot. There was no air conditioning in many of these places. People were just lined up, and now we have to press numbers on a machine and wait your turn to simply go at the desk and to make payments. So we're definitely seeing those kind of reforms here that are shifting towards the West. However, what will really happen, like Stano had said, is entirely going to depend on Armenia and the Armenian government itself. However, corruption, Anya, I would say, is the biggest factor here with the police. Especially, we saw 3 months ago during protests how the police actually acted towards ordinary citizens, and the aggression it conducted towards ordinary Armenian citizens who were protesting the Pashinyan government against having signed off the Tavush regions. But we can only hope for the better for the people here in Armenia and shifting towards EU policies. Anya?
Diana, thank you very much for this very interesting report. Take care. Now, moving back to Poland, the Polish Ministry of Sport and Tourism is prepared to involve the National Prosecutor's Office to investigate the alleged misuse of funds by the Polish Olympic Committee during the Paris 2024 Olympic Games. Today, the head of the ministry, Sławomir Nitras, held a press conference on the matter.
According to the Polish Ministry of Sport and Tourism, over $120 million were spent on preparing Polish athletes for the Olympic Games.
The National Revenue Administration will conduct the necessary audits, and the National Prosecutor's Office will investigate these cases.
Reportedly, the heads of Polish sports associations stayed in extravagant hotels, while coaches were forced to stay in hostels or ask for help to cover their airfare. We spoke to a sports psychologist who has previously worked with the Polish Olympic team about how situations like this can affect the already stressed athletes and their teams.
Looking at this from the perspective of the nervous system, it's obvious that these triggers pile up, raising the stress levels even higher.
According to the expert, this is likely to have affected the overall outcome of the competition.
Out of 60 athletes representing Poland, we won only 10 medals. This is a relatively small group of people taking center stage.
Minister Nitras has asked committees and associations involved for information about who was present at the Olympics, in what capacity they were there, and how much money was spent to finance their trip to the Games.
Warsaw has signed its third big military contract in as many days. This time it's for armored scout cars to be delivered by a domestic armaments manufacturer. The deal comes on the eve of a major military parade marking Polish Armed Forces Day. Now let's take a look at some of the biggest military contracts Poland has signed over the years. And for more on how these deals translate into increased security for Poland and Europe, stay tuned for my interview with Poland's Foreign Minister Radosław Sikorski in just a moment.
November 2006. The first F-16s ordered by Poland arrive in Poznań, one of the first major steps in forming a modern army after the fall of communism.
F-16s and Leopard tanks. These two elements essentially reshape the technological landscape of the Polish armed forces.
Today, F-16s comprise the core of the Polish Air Force, but that's set to change in the coming years, with 32 F-35s arriving in Poland by 2030.
That's actually going to be a very, very difficult task to operate with them.
The Polish Air Force is not the only part of the military that is undergoing modernization.
When it became clear that a full-scale war is a real and not a theoretical threat, then it turned out that we had to modernize all areas, including the three main types of the armed forces: the Air Force, the Army and the Navy.
Today, a contract was signed for the delivery of armored scout cars with AMZ Kutno, a domestic armaments company.
This is another deal in this great week for the Polish army. We started the week with a deal for 48 Patriot launchers. Yesterday marked a culmination point in the contracts we've been signing over the years. That is 96 Apache helicopters for the army.
The largest contract signed by Poland in recent years with the United States include the delivery of F-35s, Patriot batteries, Abrams tanks and Apache helicopters. Meanwhile, South Korea has been contracted to prove light F-A-50 fighters, K-2 Black Panther tanks and K-9 Thunder howitzers.
Peace doesn't have a price. The sky is the limit. If you would like to have democracy, freedom of your, let's say, actions, you need to have a very strong and powerful army. If you have it, you can feel the real democracy and the real freedom. And it costs.
Poland's ongoing military modernization rush is a burden for the state budget. With defense spending topping 4% of the country's GDP this year, Warsaw has been placed under the European Commission's excessive deficit procedure. The government will have to look for cuts. But as officials in Warsaw have repeatedly said, these cuts will not affect military spending. Marek Steele, TVP World.
Every year on August 15th, Poland celebrates the Armed Forces Day, a national holiday that commemorates the 1920 victory over Russia at the Battle of Warsaw during the Polish-Soviet War. Now, Polish officials have said this year's parade will demonstrate strength, agency and unity in the face of threats from the East. Now, joining me right now to talk about Poland and regional security is Polish Minister of Foreign Affairs, Radosław Sikorski. Sir, thank you very much for joining us tonight. Now, this hard-won Polish victory over a century ago, which many at the time believed was impossible, in fact, saved Europe from Russian imperialism. Minister, is Ukraine today in the same position that Poland was then?
Yes, there are some parallels. We were helped at the time by our Western allies. We received equipment, uniforms from France, ammunition from others, and Ukraine is getting considerable support. We could do even more. And Ukraine is resisting very bravely, and hopefully the result will be similar.
Well, that's right. Now, speaking of Ukraine, we have to mention Kursk incursion that happened just the days before. Now, has the Kursk offensive changed the overall state of the war? I mean, is the outlook of the potential negotiations, peace negotiations, closer than we thought?
It's too early to say, but it certainly showed that Ukraine is capable of counterattacking, that Ukraine has maneuverable forces. It seems that Russia is being forced to draw forces away from the Donetsk front, relieving the brave Ukrainian soldiers fighting there. It's showing those in the West who doubted that Ukraine can stay the course, that Ukraine can go on the counteroffensive. And I think it's a morale boost to the Ukrainians themselves. So at a time when there is talk of negotiations, it has certainly strengthened Ukraine's hand.
Well, that's what I want to ask you, but do you think this situation is going to, this leverage that Ukraine has is going to bring Russia maybe to be more open to negotiations talk?
Hopefully. Wars are never linear. In 2022, Ukraine was on the offensive. Last year, it recovered half of the previously occupied territory. This year, Russia has regained initiative, but now we have a change of the situation again. We don't yet know, but I am convinced that if Ukraine and we, friends of Ukraine, stay the course, then eventually the Russian economy will suffer the consequences, and eventually, hopefully, Putin will see that he cannot achieve his war aims.
But do you think that this is time for the world's diplomacy to play in?
Well, that depends on Russia. So far, Russia has not really called for negotiations, but for Ukraine's capitulation, which is obviously unacceptable to the Ukrainian side. At the moment, the negotiations are taking place on the battlefield.
Now, you recently cautioned European allies that they should prepare for U.S. perhaps a potential shift in U.S. approach to European security, regardless of who becomes the next U.S. president. Now, in early September, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen is going to select a new candidate for a new dedicated defense portfolio. She's going to in early September. Now, what should be the main task for the new Commissioner for Defense? Is it just coordinating procurement for military equipment, or perhaps there is space for more?
Well, there are several issues here. So first of all, yes, Europe should become more serious about being able to defend itself. I spent years talking about it from the rostrum at the European Parliament. And yes, successive US presidents from both parties. Remember Pivot to Asia by Barack Obama. And of course, President Trump's confrontational talk vis-à-vis China. So the long-term trend seems to be for America to pay more attention to the Pacific. And Europe should be aware of that. And thank God we have at last started spending more on defense. Poland has been doing its bit for years, but others have. And as regards the portfolio, remember that the European Union already has a defense commissioner. He's called High Representative for Foreign and Defense and Security Policy. And Europe already conducts military operations all over Africa, for example. And it's the High Rep who gives the political command to do so. But there is still plenty to do for a new commissioner, potentially. Military procurement is one thing, but there is cyber security, there is civil protection, protecting. We see these horrible pictures of civilian infrastructure being hit by the Russians and civilians suffering because there are no shelters. And there are other aspects of security, such as military mobility across the continent, that I think could be put together into a substantive portfolio.
But should a commissioner, the Commissioner for Defense, should that person perhaps mobilize countries in the region to spend more on the defense? Because Poland, like you said, it's 4%. In 2025, Poland wants to spend 5%. But other countries in the area are not on the same page.
I think if everybody in Europe spent what our eastern flank spends, we would be in a good place. No, I think the problem is with richer countries further west, for whom we are providing defense at our own expense.
Right.
This is why I'm such a strong supporter of European defense budget, wonderfully called the European Peace Facility, because it is accessed fairly in proportion to GDP. If Putin is a threat to all of Europe, then all of Europe should proportionately spend money to deter that threat.
But do you think Europe will spend proportionally?
Well, that's how we contribute to the EPF, which should be increased. many times. The only trouble with it is that one country, Hungary, is blocking the disbursements from EPF to refund countries for the assistance that they've given to Ukraine.
Mm-hmm. Now, recently we have seen a revival of the Weimar Triangle, especially Poland-German relationships, which have not been as good in the past years. Now, 13 years ago, you said in Berlin, "I fear German power less than German inaction." What is your opinion right now?
I think this was said at the time of the European financial crisis, but I think it applies equally to the assistance for Ukraine. Germany actually does a lot in absolute numbers, the most in Europe, but it somehow manages to convey the impression of being tardy, of doing the right thing 6 months later, and it's not as useful. So yes, I still worry about German inaction more than about German power.
But do you speak about it with your German counterparts about that?
Of course.
Can you tell us more about the conversation? What are they saying?
Well, they have a coalition too, and the Greens and the foreign ministers from the Green Party, Annalena Baerbock, was against Nord Stream before it became fashionable. She got quite a lot of flack in Germany for opposition to that political investment. So she, as you can imagine, she has a lot of credit with me. And the Greens are on the whole sound on Ukraine. But there are other parts of the political spectrum.
Mm-hmm. Now, speaking of Nord Stream, we have learned recently that German prosecutors have asked Poland for assistance to detain Ukrainian person that they suspect blew up the Nord Stream back in 2022. And I have to bring up that controversial tweet that you wrote. Thank you, USA. Now it seems that it might have been a Ukrainian special operation. What is your take on that, and what does Poland know about it?
Well, that's a good question to the prosecution authorities, but American newspapers say that the United States had foreknowledge of the operation. So perhaps there are reasons for gratitude after all.
Now, sir, finally I want to ask you, like we said, the war in Ukraine is right outside of our borders. We also face numerous hybrid attacks. You also once said, when you resumed the duty of Minister of Foreign Affairs, you said diplomacy is the first line of defense of our republic. What are the goals of Polish diplomacy in the context of regional security?
Well, to keep the war as far away from our borders as possible.
And how are we doing with that?
Well, by helping Ukraine, obviously. And secondly, to make the alliance we are in, NATO, so powerful as to deter Putin from even thinking about starting a war with us. And I think we're quite successful at both tasks.
But I think the public, because when we are seeing the pictures from Ukraine, when we are talking about the hybrid attacks, Polish society is worried, and the people who live in Poland and in the region. What would you say to them?
Well, the source of that threat is Vladimir Putin's Russia. When Russia threatens us, unfortunately, we've learned from a long historical record to believe them. And that's why we need to make our society more resilient. That's why we have a record spending on defense. That's why we've just had a successful anniversary NATO summit. And that's why we consult with allies about how to deter any aggressive Russian plans. Mm-hmm. I don't think Putin has succeeded in his original war aims. And if Ukraine wins, and we should do everything to help it, it's a chance not only for Ukraine, but also for Russia to think itself afresh and to drop these ridiculous neo-imperial pretensions.
Mm-hmm. Now, I would also like to ask you about participation in NATO's nuclear sharing. Where are we with that? We have been talking about it a while ago.
The less spoken, the better.
All right. Okay, and finally, I would like to ask you about Andrzej Poczobut, because it was also a quite controversial moment for Poland when we talked about the historical prisoner swap that we participated in. Joe Biden thanked us for it. But many said we gave up Pablo Gonzalez, but we did not get anyone in return. You said yourself that when it comes to Andrei Poczobut, that issue is on a different path, that you're negotiating. Then a few days later, you said that Poland is going to open border crossings with Belarus if they give us, Poland, Andrei Poczobut. Where are we with that? I mean, is this an instrument, is this a tool that we are negotiating with, the border crossing?
Well, Andrei Poczobut has been unfairly kept in jail under trumped-up charges by the Belarusian dictatorship for 3 years. The previous government, unfortunately, wasn't able to get him out, and it was the previous government which closed a particular border crossing as a response to the jailing of Andrei Poczobut. And I'm continuing that policy. And it's up to Lukashenko to start releasing political prisoners, including Andrei Poczobut.
But what is Poland doing to do?
I've just told you.
Okay, well, sir, thank you very much for joining us tonight here on TVP World.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching World News Tonight. Stay with us for more.